Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Koh, General Manager from SSO at Bedok and Geylang Serai, MSF, and a very warm welcome to the Guide to Legal Help Programs webinar, co-organized by MSF, Office of the Director General of Social Welfare, Law Society Pro Bono Services, and the Legal Aid Bureau. Here are some housekeeping matters before we start. Relevant materials for today's talk can be downloaded from the Handouts section, which you can see on your screen. If you are using a mobile phone or tablet, the icons should appear on your top right-hand corner. On your computer, you should see the icons on the right. Please download these very useful materials before the end of the talk. Feel free to ask any questions during the webinar. You can type them into the questions section and click send. Your questions will only be seen by the organizers. We will do our best to address them during the panel discussion. Well, please note that the discussion and any materials provided in this webinar is not intended to substitute or constitute as professional legal advice. You should consult a lawyer if you require specific legal advice. So on for today's program. Today, we are pleased to have the following speakers and panelists share their insights and experiences with us. As social service professionals, social workers and counselors, we know that our clients face multiple issues and challenges, and some of the challenges themselves do contain legal implications, be it divorce, be it criminal, be it social, civil issues. So today we are really pleased to have following speakers to actually share with us some of the programs and services that's out there, as well as how can we actually navigate this landscape, this legal landscape, to support our clients. So today we have Ms. Lim Hui Min, Director, Legal Aid Bureau, Ms. Goh Xin Hui, Assistant Director, Legal Support Unit, Legal Aid Bureau, Mr. Gopinath Pillai, Director, Criminal Legal Aid Scheme, LSPBS, Ms. Marjorie Kong, Assistant Manager, Family Justice Support Scheme, LSPBS, and last but not least, Ms. Goh Qian Hui, Assistant Manager, Community Outreach, LSPBS. So our speakers from different agencies will be sharing about the different schemes that they have. So Xin Hui from Legal Aid Bureau will be sharing about the Civil Legal Aid Scheme, the Intelligent Legal Assistant Board. This is where we want to have automated services as convenience at our fingertips is really important. AP portal and video conferencing with the SSOs and FSCs service. Our speakers from LSPBS will share about their Criminal Legal Aid Scheme, the Community Legal Clinic, and the Family Justice Support Schemes. And at the end, there will be a panel discussion where our speakers will answer as many of your questions as we can. All right, so now, may I now invite Xin Hui from Legal Aid Bureau to start the session by sharing on LAB's Civil Legal Aid Scheme and the digital programs. Xin Hui, please.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. I'm Xin Hui from the Legal Aid Bureau, and I'm one of the Bureau's legal executives. Now, the Legal Aid Bureau, in short, LAB, is a division under the Ministry of Law. Our mission is to provide quality legal aid and advice to persons of information on our services. Now, LAB provides legal aid and advice on a wide range of civil matters. The more common ones are set out in this slide. Each year, we receive about 9,000 applications for help. About half of our cases involve family matters such as divorce, adoptions, maintenance, family violence, and probate matters. The rest will be other types of civil claims such as monetary claims and tenancy disputes. Now, these are the types of cases that we do not provide advice or aid for. The main thing is to remember that we do not do criminal matters. Criminal matters are handled by Law Society's Criminal Legal Aid Scheme, CLAS. We also do not do defamation cases, breach of promise of marriage, which is an obsolete action, and cases where the applicant admits that he owes the money but just cannot pay, since in such cases there is no case to fight. We also do not do cases to enforce public rights. So this is why we do not do related actions or cases under the Elections Act. We provide 3 types of services: legal advice, legal assistance, and legal aid. Applicants can come to LAB to talk to a lawyer and get legal advice on most civil matters. The advice session will usually be about 20 minutes or less. We have a duty legal officer available on weekdays during office hours, including during lunchtime. So the applicants can come anytime it is convenient for them. For legal assistance, we help applicants draft only deeds of separation and wills. We do not assist in the drafting of corporate or conveyancing documents. Lastly, we offer legal aid to applicants to represent them in court for certain civil proceedings. This is our biggest value add, as no other organization does as many of such cases as we do. Legal advice is free. To receive legal advice, the applicant must be a Singapore citizen or permanent resident. The person will also have to pass a means test, where he will be asked a few questions about his income and assets. He does not have to provide any supporting documents at this point in time for the registration of legal advice. Similarly, to be eligible for legal aid, an applicant also has to be a Singapore citizen or PR, satisfy the means test, and in addition, satisfy the merits test. As mentioned earlier, to receive legal advice, the person will only be asked a few questions about his income and assets and not have to provide any supporting documents. Whereas for legal aid, he will have to provide supporting documents. So the means test criteria are as follows. We assess an applicant's means by looking at their per capita gross monthly household income, PCHI. The annual value of his residence, savings, and investments. Now, to pass the means test, the applicant's PCHI must be 950 or lower for the last 12 months prior to the date of the application for legal aid. The annual value of the applicant's place of residence must be 13,000 or lower, and the applicant's savings and non-CPF investments must be 10,000 or lower. Now, for applicants aged 60 and above, this amount is 40,000. This criteria is actually aligned to other social support schemes. So if an applicant is under ComCare financial assistance at the point of registration, he will be able to bypass the means test. This saves at least 1 to 2 weeks of time for the applicant, and he can get to the next stage of his application, that's the merits test, faster. If a person fails the means test, it is possible to appeal to the Civil Legal Aid Means Test Panel. The panel consists of 7 members with backgrounds in law, social services, and grassroots service. The panel will assess whether an applicant should qualify for legal aid because of extenuating circumstances, by assessing if the applicant can afford the legal fees on his own without causing him or his dependents significant hardship. The panel can waive the means test criteria entirely or exclude certain costs from the calculation of the PCHI. Now, applicants approved by the panel are still subject to the merits test. Factors that the panel will consider are whether inability to meet basic needs is due to serious and valid reasons, such as applicant is unable to earn any income because of health reasons, or has onerous obligations, example, caregiving for special needs child. Other factors include whether the applicant has sufficient support from other sources, whether the legal proceedings are urgent, and so on. Now, the next stage of the application is the merits test. An interview has to be conducted with the applicant after he passes the means test. Thereafter, the case legal officer will put up an opinion advising on the merits of the applicant's application. The opinions will generally go to either the Legal Aid Board or the Director of Legal Aid for a decision on whether to grant aid. The Director of Legal Aid deals with the straightforward cases. The board and the director will assess whether the applicant has a reasonably good case to grant aid. As I've mentioned earlier, legal advice is free. However, legally aided persons are required to pay a financial contribution to the Bureau for the work done for legal assistance or legal aid matters. The amount of contribution can range from 0 to 1,500, depending on the applicant's income and assets, as well as the complexity of the case. We often encounter applicants who have problems like financial difficulties, severe family conflict, alcohol addiction, depression, and so on. To help address these needs, LAB has put in place a referral system with partner agencies such as MSF, HDB, PAVE, and AIC, so we can refer our applicants for help with their consent. After we make the referral, our partner agency will follow up directly with the applicant and close the loop with us. Conversely, if the partner agency wants to refer an applicant to us, they can also fill in a referral form which the applicant can bring when they come to see us, which saves them time from repeating their story and also helps us understand how best to serve the applicant. Agencies can also help the applicant sign up for our digital services, which I will talk about shortly. So if your agency is interested to work with us in setting such a referral system, please contact us after this session. Now, I'll be sharing with you 4 of LAB's digital services which we have created to enhance the applicant's access to legal information and to our services. We hope that you will be able to share about our initiatives to your colleagues as well as your clients who may require legal advice, aid, or assistance. You can also help your clients access these services. Firstly is iLAB. This is a chatbot that lives on LAB's website. I invite everyone to take out your handphone and type in our website address, which you can see on the slides, and have a look at our iLAB located at the bottom right-hand corner of the web page. Now, iLAB gives potential LAB applicants basic legal information and is able to triage users into those LAB can help, those which LAB cannot help, and those where more information is needed before we can tell whether LAB can help. It can also generate simple legal document, like the memorandum of appearance in a divorce case. So, if LAB can help, the chatbot will prompt the individual to apply for legal aid either on the applicant's portal, which I will talk about later, or by attending at our office personally. And then if LAB cannot help, then the bot gives the individual alternative venues of help. And if the query becomes too complex, the bot will ask the individual to register for legal advice and see one of our duty legal officers. As you can see, instead of approaching us physically straight away, applicants can access our website and self-help first, which will save them a trip down to our office. Now, the topics covered by iLAB at present are civil and sharia court divorce cases, family violence issues, maintenance for spouses and children, custody and guardianship issues, the COVID-19 measures introduced by Parliament, and general information about LAB's processes. Now, this is an example of the iLAB conversation. We think it is quite user-friendly, so please do use it and share any feedback you may have on it. Next, let me share with you another service available online on our website, the Applicants Portal, also known as the AP Portal. Applicants can log into the AP Portal to apply for our services and do other things with us. Without using the AP Portal to apply for legal aid, an applicant has to make at least 3 trips to our office to register a case, do means test, and give statement about the case. Now, the AP portal allows an applicant to register, do means testing, and give a statement online. The applicant still has to come to our office, but only once instead of 3 times. If you have a client who requires legal aid, please encourage him or her to register on the applicant portal using his or her SingPass first. Currently, the online statement taking is only available for 3 subject matters: divorce in the civil courts, enforcement and variation of divorce court orders, and Sharia law related matters. We will be extending our online statement taking to other subject matters in future. The AP portal also allows applicants to submit their documents relating to their case online and also check the case and the status of their ongoing case. Now, we recently forwarded demo videos to MSF and our partner agencies on how to use the iLAB and AP portal. So if you are interested, you may also contact us and we can send your agency a copy of the video. So we recommend, if you are using the AP portal, do use these 3 internet browsers to access them for best results. Do remember to disable the pop-up blocker. Next is the Divorce Asset Informative Division Estimator, also known as the Divorce AIDE. This is a calculator which estimates the outcome of the division of assets in a divorce. It also educates user on how a court usually divides matrimonial assets in a divorce. Divorce AIDE will ask the user questions similar to the questions that a lawyer would ask the client at the first client consult. It also explains why the question asked is relevant to the division of matrimonial assets, as can be seen from the screenshot above. Currently, staff at the Community Justice Center and DSSAs can use this tool together with their clients. These agencies use the tool to help their clients understand the process of division of matrimonial assets and the factors involved. We are improving the tool based on the feedback we get from them. If you work in a social service organization and your organization is interested in using this tool now with your clients, do get in touch with us as well. Finally, our online legal advice scheme. We currently have ongoing arrangement with 24 SSOs and 13 FSCs to provide legal advice to their clients via video conferencing. Under this arrangement, clients of these participating SSOs and FSCs can get their social worker to make appointments with us for video conferencing sessions. This means that they can get legal advice from somewhere near their house instead of traveling all the way to our office at Maxwell Road. So you can see these are the names of the participating SSOs and FSCs. LAB has also been doing a video conferencing pilot with our Tampines hub since August 2020. This is especially useful for applicants who live in the East and wish to obtain legal advice via video conferencing. They can attend at our Tampines hub to make an appointment. The service staff at our Tampines hub will assist an applicant to register on our applicant portal. If a video conferencing appointment slot is available, then the applicant can choose to seek legal advice via video conferencing without having to personally attend at our office. LAB also has plans to extend video conferencing sessions to other integrated public service centers across various locations such as Yishun and Punggol. We hope that these digital services will give individuals more access to legal information and that this will lead to better decision making and more realistic expectations. This saves them time as well as saves LAB time. Please encourage your clients who requires LAB's assistance to tap on our digital services for greater convenience and time savings when registering for aid and or seeking legal advice. So that's the end of my presentation. So please feel free to contact us via the online inquiry form on our website if you're interested in partnering with LAB or to get more information on what I have been speaking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xing Hui. So now let us invite our LSPBS speakers, Mr. Gopinath, Tian Hui, and Marjorie, to share LSPBS's schemes and an in-depth look at the criminal legal aid scheme. Mr. Gopinath, please.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be here to be able to present on the programs that Law Society Pro Bono Services, otherwise more affectionately known as LSPBS, does. Now, before we go into the programs specifically, let me just say a few words about who we are, what we do. We often find that people get a little bit confused where to go to for specific issues that they face. So I hope this little diagram that you see on your screen now in the shape of a antibiotic or a pill will provide you the guide to the right kind of medicine that you need when you're in a certain kind of pickle. Now, let me just very quickly go through the types of schemes and where they are run. Now, basically, if for those of you who are a little less aware, the type of cases that actually come up in the courts here can broadly be separated into two categories: civil cases and criminal cases. Now, if you have a civil case and you're a Singaporean or PR, you can actually head down to the Legal Aid Bureau, which we just heard from, right? And that, of course, is something that is administered under the Ministry of Law itself. Now, the Legal Aid Bureau, as you heard, wide variety of cases. Now, what happens if you're a foreigner and or you may not be able to avail yourself of the Legal Aid Bureau's services? You can look for the Family Justice Support Scheme, which is administered by LSPBS, and which we shall hear a lot more about in the time to come. Now, on the criminal cases side of things, we have the Legal Aid Scheme for Capital Offences, which is administered by the Supreme Court. Now, these are offences which carry the death penalty. That's what a capital offence is. And the Supreme Court has a scheme where they assign volunteer lawyers to people who are facing such charges but are unable to afford their own. Then we have the Criminal Legal Aid Scheme, which I will speak about in greater detail later as well, where non-capital offences are actually covered under this scheme, which we administer, where volunteer lawyers are sought for people who qualify for assistance. Now, the last title that you see at the bottom of that slide is the Ad Hoc Pro Bono Referral Scheme. Now, we're all aware that sometimes people may not be able to avail themselves of any particular legal aid scheme and still need assistance. That is what the Ad Hoc Pro Bono Scheme is about, and I'll touch on that a little later. If we could have the next slide, please. So, very broad overview of what LSPBS does. Now, the bedrock of what we believe is the most important thing is law awareness. There's no point in having a great legal system or a fantastic court system if people themselves are not aware of what their legal rights are. In order to know that your legal rights are breached, you need to first of all understand what your rights are first. Now, for the LSPBS, the way we set out the law awareness, and my colleague will cover that a little bit more, the crux of the issue is to publicize and have talks, have publications, etc., which people can refer to find out what their legal rights are. Now, after you're aware of your legal rights, you need to find advice. A lot of time we spend advising people who come up for their legal clinics, again, in more detail later, so that you can find out what course of action is open to you. Now, the pinnacle of what we do is advocacy, and that is pro bono legal representation for needy persons, regardless of nationality. Now, that is, again, a very big distinction between what we do and what the Legal Aid Bureau does. Whilst the Legal Aid Bureau seems to concentrate on Singaporeans and PRs, we actually provide advocacy services in terms of representation, regardless of nationality. Now, let me hand you over to Chen Hui, who will tell us a little bit more about the community legal clinics.
Thank you, Gopi. Hi, I'm Qian Hui. One of the programs I help support in LSPBS is the community legal clinics. So I will first share a little bit on what legal clinics are, what our eligibility criteria are, and lastly, what the application process is like. So firstly, what are legal clinics? Clinics are short one-off consultations with a lawyer for general legal advice. We have a variety of clinics for different types of applicants, as you can see on the screen. And for today, I'll be focusing on general community legal clinics. It's for the general public, which as social workers is likely to be most of your clients. At the CLC, we provide 20-minute sessions for personal legal issues, which the applicant has not yet sought legal advice for. It's something like a GP for legal issues, just as how you would visit a polyclinic as the first port of call when you feel unwell. Legal clinics are your first port of call when you have basic legal queries. We don't have drafting or representation services at this stage. My colleagues will share a bit more on our representation schemes later on, which each have their own qualifying criteria. For eligibility, we do have a means and merits test. For the means test, we don't have a fixed financial amount, but we assess each case holistically to determine if the applicant is needy, is vulnerable, and has a case suitable for community legal clinics. As for the merits test, it's really just to check that the issues are appropriate. That means they are straightforward matters which require general legal advice to ensure that we can add value to the applicants to the clinics. Some examples of what would qualify for our CLC would be, so the most common issues we face are employment and family law matters. So some examples of such basic issues would be, my boss is not paying my salary on time, or I have been unfairly dismissed, what can I do? And an example of a basic matrimonial issue would simply just be, how can I get a divorce? These are the sort of appropriate questions to be directed to CLC, as they are straightforward matters which can be answered through general legal advice. The more complex matters would not be appropriate. So just as how you wouldn't visit a GP for specialist advice, CLC is unable to help with complicated matters. Some examples of complex matters would be if the applicant wishes to appeal against a decision which has already been made by the court, or if the applicant wishes for the lawyer to go through contracts or court documents. These kind of complicated matters will require the applicant to submit a lot of additional information and a large amount of documents for the volunteer lawyer to go through. And even so, these issues are unlikely to be resolved in a 20-minute session. So we want to highlight this because we also want to ensure that the applicant doesn't waste their time in applying for and attending a session, which ultimately will be of little use to them. Moving on to how and where the clinics are held, as well as the application process. We usually host clinics every weekday from about 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at all corners of Singapore. The locations rotate based on the day. So for example, we have Mondays at Woodlands Civic Centre, Tuesdays at Geylang Wisma Serai, etc. Our other locations include JTC Summit, HDB Hub, State Courts, and Family Justice Courts. Presently, with the escalating COVID situation, most of our clinics are held online via Zoom. But not to worry if your client is not tech savvy, because we have Zoom trial sessions just for the applicant to practice before meeting the lawyer so that they can make full use of their 20-minute session after. And as a social worker, you're also free to help your client with the session as long as your client consents to you being involved in the process. The applicants will have to register for the clinics. They cannot just turn up. We have shared the application link in our handouts, but generally the form will require personal particulars such as their job, pay, address, and most importantly, the case facts and specific questions which they wish to ask the lawyer. This is so that we on the back end can summarize the legal issues to send to the volunteer lawyer ahead of the session and help to follow up with any additional queries the lawyer may need to prepare for the session, so that at the session itself, the lawyer can really focus on answering the applicant's legal questions rather than continue with fact-checking or researching on the spot. So that 20 minutes, it will really be focusing on their legal issues only. And in addition to sending the case synopsis to our volunteer lawyers ahead of the session, we will also need information of the adverse party so that our lawyers can perform conflict checks. So for example, if an applicant wishes to divorce her husband, we will need particulars of her husband so that our volunteer lawyers can check against their own client database to ensure that there is no conflict of interest in advising the wife. And in filling in the application form, you will notice that there are different subtypes of clinics, such as the youth legal clinics, the civil legal clinics, and the family legal clinics. These are to focus on different age groups and types of legal matters, and we can provide better matching of volunteer lawyers with the applicants. For the youth legal clinics, it's for the 18 to 35-year-olds, the applicants, and the lawyers themselves will be 35 years old or younger. And the whole point of this is to help the younger applicants feel more at ease when speaking to someone of their own age group. And I guess we always joke that we don't want them to feel like, it's like their grandparents trying to advise them in something that, in a way that they're not interested in listening to. As for the civil and family legal clinics, these are for matters in that specific area of law because we do have lawyers who specialize in those areas. So generally, the applicants can apply for whichever one is appropriate for them and whichever one they're most comfortable with. These clinics are held at different locations through different modes, either physical or virtual, and on different days as shared earlier. And as social workers, you are also free to help them fill in the form and attend the session with them as long as their consent is obtained. And with that, I end my presentation on the community legal clinics, and I pass the time back to my colleague, Mr. Gopinath.
Hi, Chen Hui. Thank you again for that. We'll move on now to the criminal legal aid scheme. Now, the criminal legal aid scheme was a scheme set up in 1985 by a group of volunteer lawyers. Over the years, it has been expanded, and since 2015, we now get funding from the government as well for the scheme. Now, for a lot of you, I don't intend to go into the too detailed of an analysis of the criminal legal aid scheme, but to try and actually just provide you with the information that you need in order to be able to direct any of your beneficiaries, applicants, or people that you're dealing with in the right direction. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now, for the criminal legal aid scheme, as I mentioned earlier, it provides assistance in the form of representation for people who are facing non-capital offenses. I'll explain a little bit more about the type of offenses that are covered by CLAS a little later. An important thing to remember, as I keep mentioning, representation is given regardless of nationality. So even if you're dealing with a beneficiary or an applicant who is a foreigner, who's been charged with an offense that we cover, you are able to direct him. Now, just like LAB has a means test and merits test, we also have a means test and merits test. And our merits test is largely aligned to the test that the Legal Aid Bureau conducts. Now, under the means test, basically your disposable income and assets should not be more than $10,000 taken over the last 12 months. Now, that's again a gauge. If you feel that your applicant still deserves aid, you could still refer him or her to us, okay? Now, one thing to remember, you heard the officer from the Legal Aid Bureau talking about contributions that they get from applicants when Legal Aid Bureau provides certain services as well. Now, similarly, the Criminal Legal Aid Scheme may collect a certain amount of payment from the applicant. So don't be surprised if somebody that you've referred to us suddenly comes up to you and says, hey, they have asked me to pay like $100. I thought it was free, you know. Now, the contribution and the co-payment that we collect from individuals will actually depend on how much their income and assets is, right? It is a sliding scale and starts off from as low as $38. For more details on CLAS, you can go to the link that has been provided below. You know, or just search CLAS on the lawsocprobono.org website. Now, I explained to you in broad terms that CLAS covers non-capital offenses. Now, the list that you see before you now are the offenses that we specifically cover. Now, for most of the applicants that you meet facing charges of, for example, theft, you know, assault, grievous hurt, and things like that, they fall under number 12 on that list, the penal code. Now, the penal code has about 100 over offenses that are covered, which are generally most of the criminal offenses in Singapore. Now, the other offenses that are covered there include things like the Arms and Offences Act, the Enlistment Act, right? We have some miscellaneous offenses, the Public Order Nuisance Act, right? The Misuse of Drugs Act. So keep this list handy. If any of your applicants, again, want to check whether they qualify, they can have a look at this list of offenses and check it. Now, there are handouts that will be made available at the end of the session. Please download them if you haven't already, because in that there is also an information sheet on CLAS that you can actually refer to from time to time, which addresses most of the commonly asked questions. The next slide, please. Now, again, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on the means test because we generally align to what the Legal Aid Bureau does. But one thing that you need to remember is this, and you need to maybe advise your beneficiaries of this as well. If you're married, the income of your spouse will also be taken into consideration under the CLAS means test. If the applicant who is facing the criminal charge is a minor under the age of 21, then as long as they're single, the income of the parents are also taken into account. Now, the other thing that needs to bear mention is this. There are certain financial liabilities are generally not taken into account unless in exceptional circumstances. So if your applicant has huge credit card bills and has difficulty making ends meet because of those huge bills, that may not necessarily be taken into account. Now, of course, it's a different scenario if those credit card bills were maybe became so high because that individual was paying for very expensive medical treatment for his or her parents, for example. Now, that's one situation where we may be prepared to give some consideration to that liability. But things like your mortgage, things like your overdraft bills that you're paying, your electricity bills that you're paying may not generally be taken into account, right? Now, in the course of the interview, you will be asked very pressing questions about what are the things you're paying for and all that. So if your applicant is coming to the office for an interview or is going to receive a call, because the application process is now done via phone call, please tell him or her to set out whatever he or she thinks the exceptional circumstances are as well. Okay, if you don't tell us, we don't really know. Okay, next slide, please. Then we have the merits test. Now, you must remember, just because you pass the means test does not automatically mean you will be assigned a lawyer. We have a merits test, and the merits test is essentially a lawyer asking the applicant a series of questions regarding the case, and the lawyer will press the applicant on what the applicant intends to do. Now, the reason we do this is very simple. We want to ensure that the applicant has either reasonable grounds for defending the case, or that the applicant will be able to gain some advantage in having a lawyer assigned to him or her. Now, if, for example, somebody comes to us and says, I was caught consuming drugs, my urine was positive, and I have absolutely no explanation as to how my urine became positive. I was at home alone the entire time. Nobody was at home with me and things like that. We may consider whether or not any advantage would be gained by giving this person a lawyer. Firstly, he has to proffer some kind of explanation to explain the presence of the drugs in his urine. Now, if he says, I was actually out having drinks with my friends, and I know a couple of them take drugs, but I don't, maybe it's possible that they had accidentally spiked my drink or something like that, right? There is something then for us to pursue. Okay, so if there is no merit in the case, we may not approve the application. Okay, even though the person has the means. Now, the important thing about the merits test is this: the lawyer who is doing the interview will also give the applicant some preliminary legal advice on the matter itself and procedures moving forward. So even if the person has no real merit in assigning him a lawyer, the interviewing lawyer may still give him some advice on what kind of sentence he or she can expect, for example. What are the types of defenses that can be raised, for example? What is the kind of evidence that the applicant may need to gather so that if a lawyer is assigned subsequently, he can explain these things to the lawyer. Okay, so that's the merits test. Can we move on? Now, that's CLAS. Another scheme where we represent individuals, remember that that diagram of the pill that I gave you just now, is the ad hoc pro bono scheme. Now, the ad hoc pro bono scheme was actually born purely out of necessity. You have people who go through the system who may not be able to avail themselves of any kind of institutionalized legal aid scheme. For example, if a spouse is on a long-term visit pass and her husband stops paying her maintenance, who's Singaporean, by the way, that woman won't be able to avail herself of representation through LAB because she's on a long-term visit pass. And if you think about it, there's nowhere else for her to turn to. Now, that was one of the reasons why the ad hoc pro bono scheme was born. But again, you have a means test and a merits test. We generally use the reference to the Legal Aid Bureau means test and merits test as well. Or if it's a criminal matter, we may use the means test and merits test under the criminal legal aid scheme to assess the matter. But one very important thing, in fact, two very important things. Firstly, it has to be a case of exceptional circumstances when the person is referred to us, right? So we do not give assistance under the ad hoc pro bono scheme to anyone who doesn't get aid anywhere else. It has to be an exceptional case. There have to be strong factors in this. The second important thing that I wanted to highlight to all of you is this. If you have an applicant who you think fits into this category, you will have to refer that applicant to us. You cannot send that applicant directly to our office. We will not entertain him or her. There is a registration form that you, whether you're from the FSC, whether you're from the MPS, whether you are from any of the SSAs, fill up the registration form. The link is provided in here as well. There'll be a link given in the handouts as well subsequently. Fill up that form, and then we will get it. We will assess your referral, get in touch with you, and then get in touch with the applicant if we need to get more information as well. But remember, this is important. With the criminal legal aid scheme, people can apply directly. With the ad hoc pro bono scheme, it is a referral scheme. So you, as the representative perhaps of your applicant, will have to refer the applicant to us by filling up this form. Don't get the individual to fill up the form and send it to us as well. It will be ignored. Okay, thank you. Okay, move on. Now, I mentioned the Family Justice Support Scheme in my introduction earlier. I'll hand over now to my colleague Marjorie to give you, to add in all of the meat and to the bones that I had given earlier. Marjorie?
Thanks, Gopi. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marjorie. I'm the Assistant Manager overseeing our new Family Justice Support Scheme. So who does the Family Justice Support Scheme help? A easy way to remember this is that we don't overlap with other schemes. We are trying to fill in the gaps that in the service landscape right now. So the first group that we're trying to help is Singaporeans and permanent residents who marginally fail the Legal Aid Bureau's means test. So this group, we sometimes call them the sandwich class. The second group of people we're trying to help are foreign spouses with Singaporean children. So how will FJSS give help to these two groups of people? Now, for the first group of people, the ones who marginally fail the means test, we will actually refer them to 3 panel lawyers who agree to charge fees that are lower than their usual rates. And for the second group of people, foreign spouses who pass the means test, they will be given pro bono legal representation. Can we get the next slide, please? Yes, so next slide, please. So the types, currently we cover only matrimonial matters, and this includes divorce and child divorce, family violence, so this includes applications for personal protection orders and related orders, maintenance claims, as well as children-related issues such as custody, care and control, access, and relocation. So going into the eligibility criteria, under the modest means clearinghouse, Singaporeans and permanent residents must first approach the Legal Aid Bureau and be rejected by the Legal Aid Bureau. If the applicant receives a rejection letter from the Legal Aid Bureau, it is important that this letter is kept and submitted to us during the application process. The reason for this is because the letter contains very helpful information on the applicant's financial circumstances, and if we have this information, we will not need the applicant to go through another round of means test with us. So the means test components actually follows the Legal Aid Bureau's means test exactly, but the thresholds are slightly higher to capture this group of sandwich class. So the monthly per capita household income must not exceed $1,400. The annual value of the applicant's place of residence must not be more than $21,000. The applicant must not own property other than their place of residence. And for the last component, savings and non-CPF investments, it must not exceed $12,000. Now, if the applicant faces exceptional circumstances, for example, maybe the applicant is disabled, or if the applicant needs to pay hefty medical bills, these are the kind of exceptional circumstances that can be highlighted to us during the application process, and up to $14,000 worth of savings and investments we will send to the committee for approval. So the matching and referral process is quite a simple one. Basically, the applicants will be given the names, the contact details, and the law firm of up to 3 lawyers who express interest in the case. We will also give this information to social workers if the applicants consent and if there are any social workers on board. Then similarly, the interested lawyers will be given the applicant's contact, case details, as well as any documents that they have submitted to us during the application process. Now, under the modest means clearinghouse, it is quite a free and easy process in the sense that there's no obligation on either party to continue on with the engagement. So if at any point, if for example, the applicant decides that they do not wish to continue with the proceedings, or they have perhaps found their own lawyer, the applicant is not obliged to contact or engage any of the 3 referred lawyers. And similarly, the lawyers are also not obliged to take on the case. For example, maybe after meeting the applicant, they decide, things may not work out and they don't want to continue with the engagement. We will leave it to both parties to decide. Now, moving on to the pro bono clearinghouse. Oh, sorry. In terms of fees under the modest means clearinghouse, we do not recommend any fixed fees or any fee guidelines for the lawyers. We leave it to the lawyers to quote. This is because every applicant's financial circumstances, scope of work, and the complexity of the case is different. So we let the lawyers decide on the fees based on these factors, and this also gives both parties the room to negotiate for a more flexible fee arrangement. The fee quote is to be given only after speaking to the applicant. The reason for this is that the lawyers can only get a better idea of the case after having a meeting with the applicant and asking more detailed questions about the case. So we require that the lawyer only give the fee quote after meeting the applicant. And this fee quote will be confidential and given directly to the applicant. But during this pilot period, which will last until around June, we will require lawyers in successfully matched cases to give us this information so that we can assess the feasibility of the scheme. If there are any disputes over legal costs, we will not be involved, but we will encourage parties to resolve it with the Law Society Cost Dispute Resolve Scheme, or to accept a taxed amount on a party and party cost basis. This basically means that you let the court decide what is a fair amount to be paid. Yes, moving on to the pro bono clearinghouse. So the eligibility criteria is that the applicant has to be a foreign spouse with at least one Singaporean child. And the means test actually follows exactly the Legal Aid Bureau's means test. So the monthly per capita household income cannot exceed $950. The annual value of the applicant's place of residence must not exceed $13,000. The applicant must not own property other than their place of residence, and the savings in non-CPF investments must not exceed a total of $10,000 in value. Now, if the foreign spouse applicant marginally fails the means test, similarly, we can refer them to the modest means clearinghouse, which means that they will be referred to up to 3 lawyers who agree to charge lower fees. And we also have an additional condition, which is that the net value of matrimonial assets liable for division must not exceed $550,000. We are aware that applicants may not know this amount at the point of application, and we do not require applicants to provide this information in our application form. But what we do have in our form is a notice that if it's discovered subsequently during the proceedings that the net value of the matrimonial assets exceeds $550,000, then the applicant will no longer qualify for pro bono legal assistance, and the assigned lawyer can actually quote fees for the subsequent stages. And this, on the application form, the applicant just has to acknowledge this point. And if lawyer and applicant don't agree on fees, then the lawyer can discharge either party can discharge, and the applicant can choose to engage his or her own lawyer. Now, under the pro bono clearinghouse, we do have a merits test. We do not have this under the modest means clearinghouse because we leave it to the referred lawyers to advise the applicant on the merits and to quote fees accordingly. But under the pro bono clearinghouse, because we are assigning a lawyer to act pro bono, we will actually look at the merits. Basically, the applicant just has to have reasonable grounds in law in proceeding with or in defending the application. By and large, we don't really see any issue with this. The applications that have come in so far generally pass the merits test. But one example would be if the applicant's marriage has not reached 3 years yet, but the applicant wants to apply for divorce, we will have to turn the applicant away because it has not met the 3-year requirement for a divorce. So this is the extent of the merits that we will assess under the pro bono clearinghouse. Now, the assignment process is also quite a simple one. So the applicants and the social workers will be given the name and the contact details as well as the law firm of the lawyer who expresses interest in the case. And similarly, the lawyer will be given the applicant's details as well. So under the pro bono clearinghouse, there's no fees payable by the applicant at all. So we do have some questions from social workers once in a while. Then they're unsure whether the applicant needs to pay some sum. So for now, under FJSS Pro Bono Clearinghouse, no fees are payable at all. The lawyer will actually receive honorarium from us, and any reasonable disbursements like filing fees and printing and so on, they will be covered by us. So just to summarize what the differences are between FJSS and the Legal Aid Bureau, because both cover family matters. So FJSS, we cover matrimonial matters only at the moment, whereas the Legal Aid Bureau covers a wider range of civil matters. And under FJSS, Singaporeans and permanent residents with modest means, they will be referred to lawyers who agree to charge lower fees, whereas under the Legal Aid Bureau, Singaporeans and PRs who pass the means test will be given pro bono legal aid. And lastly, Family Justice Support Scheme helps foreign spouses. With Singaporean children who pass the means test, they will be given pro bono legal aid, whereas foreigners are not eligible for assistance under the Legal Aid Bureau. So I've come to the end of the presentation on the Family Justice Support Scheme. These are the platforms that you can connect with us, Law Society Pro Bono Services. And I think we can move on to the question and answer section.
Thank you, speakers, for your very insightful sharing. We'll now move into our Q&A segment. I would like to welcome Ms. Lim Hui Min, Director, Legal Aid Bureau, to our Q&A panel. May I also invite our panelists and our speakers to join us? Good to see all of you. All right. So we're going to look at, in this next segment, we are really looking at the different questions that our participants have raised in their capacity as social service professionals. It could be different types of questions, but I think we want to keep this as a dialogue. So we'll be happy to hear from you in different insights. Okay, so maybe let's start off first with understanding maybe the clients that usually social workers work with, right? They might have perhaps lower income, they might have lower educational standards, they may not be able to understand the language that's used in the website and so on. So the first question maybe to Hui Min is, are there plans to actually include like more languages to help clients who actually are interested to go onto the website, but they find that English may not be their primary language and they may not be comfortable? So yeah, what are your thoughts about it?
That's something we'd actually love to do, and we've been exploring. I think one issue is that there is a lot of content, and secondly, the content is quite dynamic because we are constantly updating and improving it because the law is quite a dynamic thing. So what we really need is translation technology that can actually do the translation without us having to devote a lot of human resources to the translation, which will be I think not really viable for us. So we are currently waiting for the translation technology to be improved. We understand that GovTech is looking at it, so it's something that we're monitoring quite regularly. I can say that if more English speakers use our technology tools, that will give us more time to devote to those who can't. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Hui Min. So, part of the clients, I think part of the group that we have are clients who sometimes prefer to have that human touch, to rather than interact with a bot, they rather literally connect with a person, even if it's a person over on the other side of the line, just to say hello and how are you. So perhaps I will, also want to seek your inputs on how different is it like for a client who uses perhaps a virtual platform versus somebody who might be just calling or walking in? What kind of experience would it be like for them that they can expect?
Sure. Just to clarify, though, we aren't actually providing our services through robots or the bots. So
Okay.
what our legal technology covers is all the administrative stuff, registering for aid, giving us some basic information, and actually everything else is done with a person. So if they are able to do a lot of this administrative stuff through our technology, then it means that the person that speaks to you has a lot more time to spend talking about your real issues, as opposed to taking down details like your IC number and so on. Yeah. So just want to clarify that point.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
So using our portal and our iLAB is just to find a way to get through all the basic admin stuff. Yeah, the real service is still with a person.
With a person. So
Yes.
it really sort of like removes the administrative part so that more time,
Exactly.
more face time even.
Exactly. That's the idea. That's
really helpful. So perhaps maybe I also want to just check in with Gopi. Is that the same process between what LSPBS has and LAB as well in terms of client's experience in terms of the preparatory work and also seeking legal advice?
Okay. Because of the present pandemic, Sean, we've had to actually go almost on a fully online system where applications are filed through a jot form that is filled up on the internet, and then documents are then either submitted online or emailed to us in the office. Now that is only for the registration of the case itself. We also believe strongly in the human touch and the human experience, but because of current restrictions, a face-to-face meeting sometimes is difficult. And what we have had to do is to shift to a situation where interviews are actually conducted over the phone. So our officers will actually call up the applicant and do the entire formal registration process and data gathering over the phone.
Okay.
Just to highlight, I think one of the questions that have come up, and I might as well just touch on that a little. We've been asked a lot of times, what about people who are in remand? What about the people who are not out on bail? How do they apply? So we actually work very closely with the Singapore Prison Service, and what they've actually done is they've facilitated an application form which can be filled up by the applicant in remand, and that form is actually emailed to us on a daily basis from the prisons. And then we arrange an interview, and we've been given, again, special privileges in that we have a line directly to prison, and we can call up and do the interviews over the phone as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be really, really helpful, especially when they're in remand. I don't know if Hui Min, does LAB have a service like that is in parallel to what LSPBS?
Yes. So actually, even if you're not in remand, but you're an actual prisoner serving a sentence, you are able to apply for legal aid through the prison authorities. And it is not uncommon for us to have applicants who are actually in prison for even an extended length of time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you. There's a very there are a few interesting questions with regard to lawyers, be it Legal Aid Bureau or volunteer lawyers who are helping in LSPBS. So maybe we'll start off with understanding the profile, and so there is one of our participants shared that as hearsay, right, that lawyers from Legal Aid Bureau are less experienced than the lawyer who's being paid for his services. Sometimes they say colloquially, right, good no cheap no good, right, good no cheap. So just wondering, how far is this statement true for both perhaps for Legal Aid Bureau and LSPBS?
I would say first off that any law firm would have junior lawyers and senior lawyers, and that's a very normal thing. For Legal Aid Bureau right now, there are 20 of us lawyers, but I have to say even the most junior of our lawyers right now has at least about 4 years experience. So that statement is certainly not true about the lack of experience. And in fact, the average length of experience of our lawyers would be about 8 to 10 years. And there are some lawyers there that have more than 20 years experience. The second point to make is that even if a junior lawyer is working on a file, he's actually the member of a team which is headed by a senior lawyer who has at least 10 to 15 years experience, who supervises his work. So I don't think there's a real issue. We have a comprehensive training program as well, and every junior lawyer has a mentor and a buddy to help him with his work. So I would say in terms of experience, that's not really an issue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gopi? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree perfectly with what Hui Min says. I think it's a fallacy to say that, you know, a junior lawyer cannot be experienced. And the reality is, I think even with the criminal legal aid scheme, you know, even the more junior lawyers that we have what we call CLAS fellows who join us within the first or even second year of practice. And within a year, they would have gone through something like maybe almost, you know, close to 100 cases. They would have interviewed applicants as well, you know, and all of that is experience, Sean. All of that is actually experience that can be got. Now, in terms of standards, I think what we need to stress is that, and I'm sure this is the same with the LAB as well, we maintain very high standards in representation and we demand quality representation of our applicants. So I think topmost on our service charter, if I could use that word, is we would never ever want a legally aided applicant or a pro bono applicant to feel that he is getting second or third rate representation because he's not making payment for it, you know. And in fact, some of the letters of appreciation, etc., that we received from applicants, you know, even for those who have been sentenced and are serving sentence in prison, they often write back to us and say that, you know, they're really, really thankful because you know, they could see the amount of effort that the volunteer lawyer had put in, you know, and that for us is very, very important. At CLAS, we also have a quality control system. So all volunteers, after they've completed their assignments, they return copies of the written submissions and stuff to us. We actually vet those. And if there are concerns on quality, when we can also get feedback from the courts, we generally refer them to a quality control panel made up of more senior practitioners who will actually counsel that individual volunteer. You know, and sometimes the advice that is given is not because they've done a bad job, but just to see how they can make their game better. You know, like they may have done a very good mitigation in court, for example, but it could have been made better if they had maybe referred to some other earlier authorities that the court had decided on. You know, so that's something that they could be counseled on as well. Right. We also give a lot of support to our volunteer lawyers in terms of publications, resources, access to senior practitioners as well. So we always ensure that the applicant gets the best possible representation he can.
Yeah. Thanks, Gopi. So what I'm hearing from both Hui Min and Gopi is that the lawyers are not working alone. You work in a team, and because you have the team support, you have that collective knowledge and wisdom as well in this whole process of working. It's just that you have that one face to the client, but the rest is the team behind supporting as well, right? So Hui Min, I was just wondering, like Gopi was talking about the kind of standards and support that the volunteers would have. What's it like being a lawyer, you know, who's serving at the Legal Aid Bureau in terms of the quality, support, standards, and so on that Gopi was talking about? What was it? What is
I
it
think
like?
I think it's pretty comprehensive in terms of the training program that we have, both for new lawyers as well as the continuing education program we have for lawyers who already have been working here for a while. So we have a system of, say, mock moots. We have talks and seminars, workshops, everything from managing customer service issues, how to serve our applicants in a way that makes them feel very understood and listened to, which is a more soft skill thing, all the way to the hard law of areas, including bankruptcy or manpower matters or personal injuries. So we have regular training sessions as well. There's a wealth of internal materials that we have to refer to. And as I said, a very strong mentor buddy system where the senior lawyers are mentoring the juniors. And for our signed up files, which are done by volunteer lawyers, there's a supervising legal officer from Legal Aid on every assigned out file that will review the file to make sure that it's on track. Yes.
Oh, thank you. So there's a lot of that assurance that, just because it's, supported, it's pro bono doesn't necessarily mean that it's no good. But actually there's a lot of understanding that because there are people who cannot afford, we are plugging the gap to meet their legal needs as well. So thank you. So one of the things that I think our social work or social workers or social service professionals are curious about, it's about preparation. Like when we ourselves are preparing to meet a client who might have, be it legal concerns, be it civil or criminal, how do we access some of these resources? Can we try them out? Are there links that we can actually go in to play around with and try and not get into trouble for just putting in a referral system or just to see how that works? I'm just wondering, is there any way for social workers or social service professionals to try out the referral systems or the digital platforms?
I think in terms of the digital platforms, for our iLAB, anyone can go in and play with it all you like, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, for Divorce AIDE, because I saw a question on that there, that's our matrimonial assets predictor.
Right.
If your agency is very interested in that, then please write to us because right now it's not open to the public or to individuals. We are trying to refine the product so that it becomes better, so that when we feel that the time is right, then we will make it available to the public and to individuals to play with, well, not play with, to get educated from, try it out. But right now we are refining the product with feedback from our partner social service agencies. Yeah, so if you wish to partner us in this, then please write to us. Yeah. In terms of what a social worker can do to assist the client who is going to seek legal advice, then I think one valuable thing to keep in mind is don't give legal advice yourself, even accidentally, because you might be in a position where you end up opining on legal issues which then get misinterpreted by the client. So I would say be very careful about that. Do say if it seems like a legal thing, I think we should wait for the lawyer's opinion. I think that's one.
Yeah.
The second one is to manage the client's expectations on what a lawyer's role is, because some clients may think, the lawyer will do everything and know everything and solve every problem. But actually, a lot depends on the client giving the lawyer accurate information and sufficient documents. Also, the client has to know what is the outcome he wants to achieve. He has to be prepared to listen to the lawyer and make an attempt to understand the legal advice given. And then finally, he has to make a decision. So it's not the lawyer that will make a decision for him, but he has to make a decision based on the options that he is presented. That is the role of the lawyer, and I think it's helpful if the social worker can help educate the client on what a lawyer is supposed to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds complicated in terms of the whole process. That it doesn't mean you find a lawyer and everything is just lock, stock, barrel to the lawyer to sort out, right? So the role of the social worker, counselors, the social service professionals are still very critical because it is very stressful, both socially, legally, and all other matters.
I think the social worker can help the client work out his narrative. Yeah.
Okay.
In a chronological way, so that when he finally sees the lawyer, he doesn't spend too much time saying duplicate things or repeating his story unnecessarily or jumping around. So if the social worker can help the client work out his narrative in a very coherent way, I think that would be pretty helpful for the lawyer. Yeah.
Right.
And of course, if the social worker can help the client articulate maybe certain challenges that he has. For example, I'm very afraid to face my abuser in court, for instance, then it'd be useful to highlight those things to the lawyer as well. Yeah.
Okay. So in this whole process, when we're looking at preparing the client's narrative, are there times where, where sometimes the social workers get, like you say, the legal advice, sometimes personal experience or something comes in. How do we maintain a little bit of that distance or that, yet at the same time attending to them?
I think one tip is not to give your personal views on whether this thing can or cannot be done.
Okay.
I think that's pretty important. And number two, whatever the client says, do follow up with, and how do you know this? And what is the evidence for this? Or do you have the documents to show this? So that you can focus the client's mind on the kind of evidence that he will be expected to provide eventually. Because a lot of times, I think clients get quite upset when the lawyer keeps asking, well, how do you prove that? How do you prove that? Do you have the document and so on? Do you have the witnesses? And then, yeah, they get a bit agitated if they don't have it or they're surprised by that kind of question.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important, because what I'm hearing is that it's not just about the client's individual perception, but the evidence behind it. And to be able to prepare the client's narrative is to also be able to supplement the evidence that goes along with it. Because at the end of the day, when they're so stressed up and they hear the lawyer asking them that question, it's like, do you trust me or not? Why are you asking me the evidence? So
exactly.
that's something that's important. Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So Gopi, how about when it comes to criminal prosecution, and then let's say if it's a drug-related offense, how do we then prepare a client who might be, ambivalent about sharing too much? Because you said that, it's important for the clients to be able to share as well, right, accurately with the lawyers so that they can do a merits test as well.
Okay. Obviously, if you have an applicant who is reluctant to share information, even with the interviewing lawyer, he or she will be told that if they are not forthright, or if they are found that they are not telling the truth in the application, we may refuse to assign a lawyer to them. Now, for the social workers, for people who are interacting with persons who may have been called in and may have just been charged for an offense, and who may not have had the opportunity of applying for CLAS directly, one thing I would ask all of them to do is maybe speak to the applicant and tell the applicant to try and recall what the applicant had said in his or her statement to the police, and to write that down. If you can get that written down soon after the investigations are done or when the statement is done, the applicant can actually bring that along with him or her to the interview, so that when the interviewing lawyer is asking him or her questions, he can refer to that and say, oh yeah, I remember the officer asked me this and this is what I said. And that will probably be the best way to relay the information across to the interviewing lawyer too. It will also enable, like I said, the interviewing lawyer to give the advice to the applicant. As what Hui Min said, if you need to prepare some evidence for the case, we will say, go and talk to your neighbors and all that now, because they may be able to confirm what time you were at home on that day or things like that, and then those are things that you can relate to the interviewing lawyer as well.
So it seems that there's a lot of prep work as well in terms of preparing them mentally, emotionally in this whole process. And it's a big role. Okay, so one of the things that I think was a key feature that I hear from LAB and from LSPBS is about means testing. And I hear about household income. So maybe to Hui Min first. Over at LAB, if there's a strained relationship between the applicant and their family members that they're staying with, how do we manage household income, during means testing?
Yeah, so there are some matters such as divorce where we automatically discount a family member's income. For example, if there's two spouses and one of them applies for divorce, we will not count the other spouse's income. So certain categories of cases, we take care of that right from the start. For other types of cases, for example, if you have sort of letters of administration matter and some of the beneficiaries are estranged from the others, that's the household members are estranged, we might get the applicant to just make a statement, a declaration, to say that I am estranged from my household members and they will not be supporting my application. They do not intend to take out the application themselves, at which point we won't then count the income of the household members. Yeah.
Gopi?
Yeah,
Over
for
at
CLAS,
LSPBS?
yes, it's a very similar kind of discretion that we have for CLAS. For example, you may be facing a charge of assaulting your spouse. So chances are your spouse isn't going to be very supportive of your legal aid application, unless of course you've reconciled, you've made up and stuff like that. Sometimes we often find for remandees, who are married, they will often come and tell us that, relationship is strained. Now that I'm back in prison, this is my third time back here. My spouse has already said, I don't want to see you ever again after this. So they will have difficulties even sometimes making that contribution payment that we may levy on them. So again, in certain types of situations, we will not take that income into account. Marjorie, from the FJSS perspective, anything to add on the means test or excluding, spouse's income?
Yeah, nothing to add because we actually follow the Legal Aid Bureau's approach exactly. Yeah, they have been providing very helpful advice to us about administering the means test. So yeah, we do actually adopt the same approach, which is to exclude the spouse's income when it comes to divorce matters.
Right. Thank you. So Hui Min, you mentioned something that was interesting and foreign to me. It's called letters of administration. Can you briefly just share with us what that is and whether there are agencies who can actually help with this?
Yes. So what happens is when a person passes away and he leaves behind certain assets, there has to have a certain court application done in order to get permission for somebody to administer the estate. So this is when a person dies without a will. If he dies with a will, then it's called probate. But anyway, the outcome is the same, that somebody is appointed to then administer the estate, which means, to close bank accounts, to pay the monies to the beneficiaries, to sell properties, transfer titles to things, and so on. This is one of the things that Legal Aid Bureau will help in. You just have to apply and of course pass our means tests, and merits tests,
So will the social worker be able to apply, or does the family have to apply directly to
the family member? Yeah, the family member who intends to be the administrator of the estate will have to apply to the Legal Aid Bureau. Because as a social worker, you don't want to be administering somebody's estates anyway.
That's
so that's not a good idea. Yes.
All right. So in the letters of administration or the probate is actually for someone who has passed on. So if somebody who's still alive but in a way lacking mental capacity, where do social workers go actually for legal advice or to direct family to for legal advice?
They can walk into our Legal Aid Bureau any day during office hours for legal advice on this issue. So for someone who has lost capacity, either they've done a lasting power of attorney, but maybe that's not so common. But if they have that, which is great, then the attorney, without any court application or anything, can actually take over the affairs of the person who has lost mental capacity and manage everything for him. But if they do not have an attorney because they didn't sign the lasting power of attorney, then they have to make a court application to be a deputy of the person who has lost mental capacity. And this is something that Legal Aid Bureau can help with as well. I should also add that the family justice courts have had this new IFAMS system where somebody, without going through a lawyer, can actually make an application to be a deputy through the system if their case is relatively straightforward. Not too many assets, not too many issues, very straightforward kind of case. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that will be very fast. Yes.
So basically, I would say that most civil matters, then Legal Aid Bureau is the first port of call, if there's a way to just put it that way. Right?
Yes, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so with legal civil matters pertaining to the Sharia law, can then FJSS actually assist in civil matters?
We do Sharia matters as well. I mean, just to clarify.
You do
we
as
also
well.
do Sharia, yes. But Sharia court matters are a bit different from the civil divorce. So for the Sharia process, the parties actually register for divorce first, and then they have to go through a compulsory counseling period and mediation period. And it's only if that does not succeed, then do they come to legal aid for help with the actual contested court proceedings. But I think as far as possible, the idea of the Sharia court is to try and get parties to resolve things amicably without contested hearing, before the filing of the divorce papers. Yes.
And I suppose the legal process can sometimes be very protracted. It can be very long. So as a social worker, or somebody who's a professional supporting our clients, how do we get updates on our clients' progress or how the case is progressing? Do we contact the client's lawyers directly, or do we have to actually get an explicit authorization and then we can get a direct information from the lawyers? How does it work for civil matters?
So there are two ways. There is this thing called the applicant portal, which my colleague was talking about earlier. And if the applicant can actually be helped to log on to that portal using their SingPass, updates on the case can be found in the portal, through the portal. Yeah, so that's one way, right? Okay. But the other way is, of course, to make contact with the case officers on the file in legal aid. We normally ask our clients for a consent at the very start of the case, a consent to share information which we think would be necessary to process their case with any agency that we think is relevant. So they would normally have given us that consent. Yeah. So yes, anyway, so I don't think they have to get a proper written consent. I do think it's very helpful for the social worker to let the client know that if you're all right with it, I will be communicating directly to the Legal Aid Bureau on your case. Are you okay with it? And then, of course, you would make your own notes, right? To show that the client was agreeable. And then you can write to us and say, I'm this person's social worker. I've obtained their consent to get updates from you on the case. And then we will communicate with you directly after that. We're quite used to working in collaboration with social workers and are quite happy to do that. Yeah. Okay. And of course, if you wish to accompany your client to court session or for meetings with us, we welcome that as well. Yes.
Right. Hold that thought, because I have one more question for you, but let me go to Gopi first, just to have a sense. What is it like? I mean, Hui Min talked about the civil law aspects. How is it like over at the criminal, law aspects, where if you want to get a progress of the client's case, similar to what I just asked Hui Min, how is it different or similar for?
Well, actually, it's pretty much similar to what Hui Min was saying. If the person was referred to us by an SSA, we will usually tell the SSA, go and ask the applicant directly. You can actually get an update from the applicant directly. And if he wants, the SSA to speak to the lawyer direct, then he'll probably need to convey the consent to the lawyer as well. So the lawyer may get him to sign an authorization, etc. as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So Hui Min, I had a follow-up question for you.
Mhm.
We talked about how the social worker or the social service professional might be seeking updates from the lawyers. Now I turn it the other way around, where the lawyer is asking the social workers for information. So then the question is, should the social workers be responding? And if they do, um, what's an appropriate way, that you would say that, okay, this is how we ought to respond? Should the social workers just write in, or should the director be signing off? Things like that. How do social workers respond? How should social workers respond? Should a client's lawyer reach out for information, especially, let's say, civil matters?
I assume that this is a social worker for our applicant, so we're on the same
Yes.
side. Yes, okay.
Yes.
So what would happen is that we would have to show you the consent that we've obtained, or to assure you that we've obtained our client's consent for the sharing of the information, right? So there would be something in writing from us about that. Okay, then you don't have to see the actual client's signature. I think if we write you an email or a letter with that assurance, you can take our word for it, right? Because it would be a breach of ethics if we were to lie about something like that. Okay, then secondly, it depends on the nature of the information that we are looking for. Sometimes it could be, where is the client? Yeah, because we may not have heard from the client for a long time. And we will be asking the social worker, have you heard from the client? Because we haven't heard from the client, and it's rather urgent because there's some court proceedings and we need instructions. So yeah, that's one quite large category of cases. Yeah. Then another category of cases would be, look, we've tried to explain to the client to get this document or whatever, but somehow he doesn't seem to be able to. Can you help him? That would be another class of cases.
Okay.
And then third, we find that the client is very emotional or frightened or something. Would you be able to provide some emotional support, like accompany him to the office or to court or something like that? So these are the three areas that I think we might find social workers very useful. Otherwise, we should be getting the information directly from the clients ourselves,
Okay.
right? So the maybe if we ask the social worker, it might be to try and understand the client better. If we find that the client somehow is not responsive to us, or seems to be evading our questions, or is intimidated perhaps by us, I mean, we might ask the social worker for some maybe insights on how to handle this client in a way that makes the client feel comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, because lawyers can be quite intimidating, etc. So maybe the social worker can help to fill us in on why the client is reacting this way, and what we can do to make for a better partnership with our clients.
Right.
Yes.
Because sometimes when the social workers see a couple, so both of them are clients. So when one of them reach out as a lawyer, so then there is a bit of a tension. How do we then manage that aspect? Because they both have their own representations, and they're both our clients because they're doing marital work together. How should we be responding?
I would respond with a question, which is, why do you need this information from me, and how ultimately are you going to use it? Yes. So if I was a social worker, I would be asking that question, because if the answer is, oh, because ultimately I want this information in order to have you give evidence on it in court or something, then of course you at that stage need to seek your own legal advice, perhaps. But if the query is more along the lines of, look, I don't know why my client is crying all the time and seems very upset, and she can't really give me proper instructions, but I really want to help her. What can I do in order to make my client more comfortable? Then perhaps you could give some tips or something like that. Yeah, but you really need to understand the purpose, I think, of why you're being asked for information, and what exactly are you being asked for. Because I don't know, there may be certain social worker ethics about how much you can reveal as well. Yes.
I think there's a lot about ethics. Yeah.
And I think there's no harm explaining your position to the lawyer. Just to let the lawyer understand that you may not be so free to answer those questions. Yeah, I think that's okay.
Well, in this in this process of discussing the case with the lawyers, are the sessions considered without prejudice, or how does that work in the interaction? Because the lawyers may contact the agency and they might send a letter. So I suppose if it's a letter, then we will have to respond in writing back to the request, and then it goes back and forth. So it's not as I suppose responsive in terms of time turnaround. But would you suggest that even if it's a call, that we ought to respond in writing, or at least an email for documentation? How do we as social workers ensure that we are above reproach? There's some documentation in that whole process when working with a client's lawyer, or is that something that
I think
you could?
I think it's quite hard to answer very generally. I really think it's quite a case by case thing, and it also depends on whether you know the lawyer, you've worked with the lawyer before, you understand what the lawyer is trying to do. I suppose if you really want to be clear, you could then say to the lawyer, can we establish some ground rules for our communication? Which is that whatever I'm saying, you're not going to use in a public way, or you're not going to share with a third party without my consent, or something like that. I suppose you could establish that understanding.
Okay.
And see if the lawyer is agreeable to those conditions.
Right.
And then you can take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I know it's hard to give a generic answer because it really depends on the different situations. So thank you. I really appreciate it. So
Yeah, no worries.
maybe one of the other questions that I think, apart from the civil ones, there's an interesting question with regard to criminal offense that I thought maybe Gopi can share some of his views on. And so if a client that we have is being charged for a criminal offense and he intends to plead guilty, will hiring a lawyer be helpful?
I would definitely say yes, for a variety of reasons. I mean, most people may not be aware, but there are a variety of sentencing options that are available to the courts, right? There may be questions that can be asked to the accused persons to explain away what may seem to be a very heinous offense, right? But you may be able to extract information from that individual to explain it to the court such that his culpability is not so high anymore. And these are things that a lawyer will always be able to advise you about. You may be charged with a particular offense not knowing that there is an alternative lower charge that could be preferred in certain circumstances as well. And sometimes by approaching a lawyer and getting information on that, it could help you decide, on whether to continue or not. Sometimes it helps getting a consult with a lawyer first. You could try either at the legal clinics or something like that. And then maybe the lawyer can then have a look at your matter, give you some preliminary advice and suggest, actually, you should go and see a lawyer about this, because from what I hear, you may be able to get probation, for example, and not have to go into prison, so things like that will certainly help.
Okay. So it's in a way trying to lay out the options and the implications and what's the impact and how do we then manage it, if I'm understanding it.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And I think in both cases, be it civil matters or criminal, it's often very, very stressful. And I think, Hui Min, you were also talking about how sometimes lawyers might reach out to social workers and say that, can you tell me how to connect with your client a bit better, because the client seems a bit, taken aback or withdrawn. So maybe to both of you, you could share a little bit how the lawyers over at Legal Aid and also LSPBS volunteers, how they train to sort of like support their clients, emotionally, or the emotional stress that comes up from these cases. Yeah.
So for Legal Aid, we do have a system where our lawyers and legal executives are taught how to spot social needs and social issues. So there's actually a standard checklist they go through for a lot of cases to try and ascertain that. And if they find, for example, that the client's suffering from family violence or has addiction issues or whatever, then they will encourage them to accept a referral to a social service agency. And hopefully with the help of this agency, then the client should stabilize and be able to deal with their issues. Then for the lawyers and legal executives themselves, we do have our in-house training to teach people how to manage applicants who are more vulnerable emotionally, or who are struggling with various issues in their own lives. We've had talks from all sorts of agencies, from PAVE to Agency for Integrated Care and so on. So I think in-house our lawyers are fairly sensitized to a variety of issues. Yeah.
So there's an exposure as well, like referral systems for people to know how to refer if there are additional needs. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. Gopi, how about LSPBS?
Well, even at LSPBS, I mean, I think we make it a point to ensure that, you know, our staff, our officers, colleagues, etc., always are able to come and approach us if they have any issues that they are facing. It doesn't need to be, you know, only a legal problem that they are facing or an applicant-related issue. Even if it's a personal issue, I'd like to think that we have an environment where, you know, our colleagues can come up to speak to us. I'm glad that neither Marjorie or Chen Hui are, you know, shaking their heads in disagreement at what I say. But where the applicants are concerned, we also look out for various social needs as well. One of the biggest pain points for us sometimes is, you know, if the applicant is the sole breadwinner in the family, and there is a high chance that the applicant is going to go into prison for an extended period of time, we want to ensure that the family doesn't suffer as a consequence of that as well. And we work with various stakeholders as well as the Community Justice Center, which is, you know, in the state courts as well, which have access to a lot of social service, you know, divisions and assistance as well. So we do direct them there, and then they are, you know, the family is followed up as well, and ensure that the needs of the family are taken care of. When we're dealing with the applicants directly, I mean, sometimes you come across applicants who might have psychiatric, psychological issues. They may have addiction issues, you know, whether it's drugs, alcohol, and the like. So we do also direct them towards things like, you know, the NAMS treatment in IH, counseling, and things like that, so that they, you know, are equipped with the necessary, you know, skills that they need to overcome those problems.
Yeah. And that's the recognition that is multifaceted to the issues that they're facing. Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So Gopi, we're talking about applicants and the support that they had and they need in terms of managing maybe the pending criminal prosecution and so on, or legal concerns that they have. How about youth offenders, especially those who are below 21? How do we support them to ensure that they have access to the legal system, especially because some of them may have very strained relationship with their parents, that they may not get any support or any endorsement or things like that, and they may not have guardians. So maybe your thoughts on what we can do to support this young offenders.
I mean, I think again, you know, one of I remember a case which you know I still remember, even though it was several years ago. There was this boy who was, I think, like 16 or 16 and a half, and he was in remand, you know, and he was facing nothing very serious. I think he needed somebody to bail him out for $5,000, you know, and you know what we commonly refer to as IC bail. You know, you basically just need a citizen to turn up at the bail center with a IC. They'll be able to sign the person out, and then, you know, he comes out. But this boy was in remand, and I was interviewing him for his application for legal aid. And so I then asked him, I said, you know, for background, etc., again, strained relationship, parents didn't want to have anything to do with him. I think the parents also may have been cleaners or something like that. And I think this boy had a history of going to boys' home, and, you know, finally got charged as an adult as well. So he couldn't get anybody to bail him out. Eventually, we managed to quickly conclude his matter such that he was out of prison based on the amount of time he had already spent inside. But what we did for that case is basically to follow up with him and get somebody from his FSC to actually, get in touch with him and follow up on his needs and requirements as well. So we realized, for example, if the FSC, if you are dealing with beneficiaries, even the SSAs, you're dealing with beneficiaries, and you see kids who are falling into this pattern, it may be useful to keep an eye on them on a slightly more regular basis, just to see whether they, are able to get access to justice. Prisons is fantastic because whoever is stuck in remand, prison actually goes to them and said, do you have a lawyer or not? Do you want to apply for CLAS? It's very proactive. We try to have people in court as well to keep a lookout on if there are accused persons who are young and who are unrepresented. Sometimes our in-house lawyers also, when they go to court, they may come back and say, boss, I saw this individual, looks very young, but he was not represented and didn't have a clue what was going on. So back end, we then work with the courts to try and, find out who that individual is, and then we'll reach out as well. But if, SSAs who come across such individuals, please refer them to us. We'll be more than happy to see what we can do to help them.
Right. So in a way, it's really looking at attending and being present. If you see somebody who needs the help, to extend the help, and not just go in with the blinkers and come out and then okay, we're done. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Right.
That's absolutely right.
Okay. Thank you. So now in this situation where we come to the COVID situation where it's evolving and it's complicated at this moment with safe distancing and so on. For applicants, be it for Legal Aid Bureau or LSPBS, do applicants need to be physically present at the office, or can actually applicants apply to be interviewed online or via video conference? Maybe Hui Min, you want to go first?
Yeah. Since circuit breaker kicked in last year, we have put in place a system where almost everything can be done through video conferencing or the phone. But this is provided, of course, that the applicant has the necessary technology to do things. It's not just a matter of video conferencing, but sometimes they might have to sign documents electronically as well. So provided that they do have the tech to do that, then yes, I think almost all of it can be done virtually.
Okay. And if they don't have the tech, can they go to one of the social service agencies and be able to do that as well?
We do have video conferencing arrangements, as Xin Hui was saying, with some FSCs and SSOs. That is for legal advice, though. For the actual cases, I don't know the extent to which a social worker would be willing to assist the applicant with the signing of documents and all that. If the social worker is willing to assist, then great. That's really good. Yeah. Or the person's children.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It might be just loaning them the equipment. Let's say they don't have the laptop at home to be able to do it. They can do it at the center, and that's fine, right?
It's fine. It's just that I don't know many agencies that actually would allow the applicant to access their equipment very independently in a room. So yeah, I'm not sure how many agencies actually have that facility or want to have that facility. Yeah.
Okay. But that's just because they would have to access it in private, and so agencies may have some policy regarding that.
Yeah, that's right. But because you're not too sure what they're doing in addition to the work on their cases, yeah. But of course, if the agency is willing to do all that and facilitates it, then of course it's no problem. Yeah, for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gopi.
Yeah, similarly. Actually, we actually do have a fair amount of referrals from the SSAs and all that come to us, and actually we've been blessed because a lot of them help us with the follow-up as well. So if we need more information, we need more documents, they're quite happy to get in touch with the beneficiary and help with the process. Some of them, as Women said, I don't think they have like a standalone computer for them to allow the applicant to make the application directly, but they're very, very helpful in that I think they sit together with the applicant and actually get the application done for them as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's just that for civil matters, it's very, very documentation heavy. I think much more so than criminal matters. So I think there's a bit more challenges for that. Yeah, a lot of affidavits and things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in a way, that whole process is not just about form filling, but that journey itself, providing that support for them in the whole process is equally important, right? So even though it's virtual, but it's still that human touch, be it, person to person and showing the care. Okay. We have one of the participants actually ask, their experience working with clients. This is more for Hui Min. Have clients who actually go through, be it divorce matters, civil matters. Maybe we can isolate it a little bit because otherwise the question might be too generic. So what's the estimated duration like for a client who's going through divorce from application all the way to the final stages of conclusion and the verdict and everything? What is the duration like, or estimated range of duration?
So I think that depends on whether it is a contested divorce or it's not a contested divorce. So although the subject matter is divorce and you think all the timelines should roughly be the same, it varies a lot from case to case, depending on whether the client is able to provide us with the information and documents we need comprehensively. Secondly, the extent to which the client can come down or meet up with us to give instructions whenever we need to, whether the other party is missing and we have to hunt for him in order to deliver the divorce papers, or whether it's very easy to do that, whether, after mediating, they actually cannot settle and we have to then fight on a range of issues, and how protracted that contest is. So if it's one of those super simple cases with hardly any issues, then even in 6 to 8 months, that we could possibly have the final judgment. But if it's contested, then it could take even a couple of years. Of course, we hope to finish most of our matters within a year to year and a half, if possible. But much depends on the individual case.
Okay, thank you. All right, so maybe one final question for all our panelists. I thought this is something that would be leveraging on your collective wisdom, also for our social service professionals. If you had one key advice from your many years of experience and your programs and the agencies that you see, what would be one key advice that you can share with our participants as a takeaway for the time that we spent today? Maybe you'll go with Hui Min. Do you want to start us off?
I have 2 pieces of advice. One is go online to save time. Because we do have all these legal technology products, and by all means encourage the clients to use that to save them some trips or sessions with legal aid, so that we can save time on the admin stuff and go straight to what's really important. Yeah, so that's one piece of advice. The second piece of advice is prepare a coherent narrative before coming. Yeah, whether it's for advice or aid or anything, if you have a coherent narrative and you're sure of the evidence that supports your narrative, that is so helpful for the lawyer, and it will save you time as well. Yeah, and as social workers, if you're sending off your clients to see lawyers or whatever, you send them with some sort of letter to help them explain themselves. I think that's very helpful as well. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Very valuable advice. How about Xin Hui? Before we go over to LSPBS, yeah. Xin Hui.
Well, similarly, I also encourage social workers to help their clients access to digital services. And in my course of work, I also encounter social workers who have worked with us very closely, and we are very happy to actually work with them, be it providing assistance in using digital modes, using laptops, using digital signing and things like that. So we are very happy to work with social workers, and I do encourage them to help their clients to access these digital services and work with us closely.
Thank you. Gopi?
I would also actually, I was going to echo exactly what Hui Min said about check what is available, check what are the resources that are available first, and then make inquiries. You know, don't feel that you're alone. I mean, there are lots of people I've come across who may be facing a criminal charge in court, may have had an argument with the spouse, and the spouse is threatening a divorce, and they keep the problems to themselves. They need to realize, and the SSAs and all that, because you're in constant communication with these people, tell them, always remind them that there are people out there who are more than willing to help, you know, whether they are lawyers or you know, volunteers, etc. You know, there are avenues to get legal assistance. Make use of that, you know, and go and find out what's available. If you can't find what you want, just ask anyway. You know, we have an inquiry email as well, where you can just drop us an inquiry, give us a little short gist of what your problem is, and ask at the end, can you help me? You know, somebody will reach out to you, and if we can't do it, we'll try and find somebody else who can, you know, but if we can, we'll certainly reach out and see what we can do thereafter.
Hi. Thank you. That's really important, because I think a lot of times we may not be familiar with which agency to go to. And what we worry is when we go to the wrong agency, it stops there and we have to go to another new place. So I think it's really heartening. Yep.
Yeah. So remember that pill that the picture of the pill, keep that in mind. So the moment you have a problem, look at where it goes to and then reach out to that agency.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. Thanks. Okay, how about Tian Hui?
I think there's been a lot of great advice. I really just want to echo, I mean, don't be afraid to ask for help. We know the legal system can get quite confusing for those who are unfamiliar. So while it's important to seek the right type of help, but if you're really unsure where to go, just reach out to anyone really, and we will try our best to help you, or at least direct you to somewhere appropriate. And I think in one of the handouts, we've also included this list of avenues of help for social workers, for applicants, anyone really. That's all. And I also wanted to thank social workers, because I think you guys do really great work, and we're really happy to be working collaboratively with you.
Absolutely.
I think it's a team effort. Thank you. So, Marjorie, you want to?
Yeah, hi. I completely agree with what has been shared so far. Maybe just to add that it would be very helpful for us if at the application stage you provide as much information as you have, because sometimes we do have very vague answers like, why do you want to seek divorce? And it's just a phrase of like family violence, and it stops there. But we want to know, like, you know, how long has this been taking place? What kind of violence has been occurred? You know, who has it been committed against? You know, all of this information is very helpful for us. So just give as much details as you can, and you know, like Ms. Hui Min said, if there's evidence, please provide it as well. Yeah, and I would also like to thank the social workers, because actually most of our referrals come from social workers, and they've been very helpful in you know, helping us liaise with the applicants. So thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you. So maybe final words, maybe for Hui Min or Gopi, do you want to just do you have any final words for our participants before we wrap up?
I just have an observation to share. When I was a lawyer, I knew very little about the social work field. So that's something that I only became alive to as I started seeing more cases. And I realized that for a lot of people, the legal problems are but a symptom of their underlying issues. And I know that no matter how hard we lawyers work to solve the legal problems, if the underlying issues are not tackled, the legal problems will recur, or it doesn't really solve the person's true needs. So I think the social workers are the ones that are really heroic for tackling the true needs of the people. And you know, whatever we lawyers can do to help in that process, I think we would be very, very happy and privileged that we can help in this process. Yes.
I agree. I actually, women, you hit the nail on the head. You know, for us, we see the applicants, and all that, when they're facing legal issues in their life. But I think with the social service officers and all that, they deal with almost each and every aspect of the applicant's life, and they will be involved in it whether they like it or not, because very often, you know, once you have an applicant who's getting assistance from a social service worker, chances are all and any problem that that person faces, he will go back to the social service, to the social worker to try and get assistance, you know. So, you know, it's fantastic work that you guys do. And what we'd also like to hear from the social service agencies, the workers, is how else can we make things better for you? You know, is there a way that we can run, you know, trainings or courses or things like that to make it easier for you to understand and appreciate legal processes and things like that? If they are, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to see what we can do, you know, to help you guys continue to do the great work that you do.
Thank you. So we will take up your offer, both Hui Min and Gopi. I think it's really heartening because it really takes everybody to support an individual because our needs are so diverse. And I really appreciate each one of you for the hard work that you've been also striving alongside us to serve our community. So thank you so much. All right, so everybody, we've come to the end of our session today. Please remember to download the useful resources regarding the issues we've actually touched on today. Again, they can be found at the Files tab on your screen. We hope you found our webinar on legal help programs useful. Your feedback will help us make future webinars or talks more relevant and useful to you. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey, and we will appreciate your feedback on today's session. So thank you very much to our dear speakers, panelists, as well for spending your time with us. And on behalf of MSF Office of Director General of Social Welfare, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I wish you all a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.